Joining us tonight, James Rubin, adjunct professor at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. He was Assistant Secretary of State in the Clinton administration. And also with us, Carla Robbins, Deputy Editorial Page Editor of the New York Times. Good to see both of you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Jamie, let me start with you. Can we realistically expect Hamid Karzai to carry out any of the reforms which are now being demanded of him? Clean up corruption, go out and make the arrests that are necessary. What do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting now that Prime Minister Brown in the UK has joined with the Obama administration in demanding these kind of steps on corruption. And I think what it shows is that the NATO allies are all agreed on the goals. The problem is that this really isn't a NATO mission. This is really a US mission with some help from the British and the Canadians. And the Europeans, although they agree in theory, they are right now sitting back, watching, waiting, hoping that the Obama administration's review of Afghanistan will not force them to have to do more, because they just don't believe the war in Afghanistan is worth risking much in terms of troops, treasure, and money. And they don't really expect, I don't think, Afghanistan to change along the lines of cleaning up the government there.
Carla, what do you think? Do you think that this is going to make any difference to the lives of ordinary Afghans?
Well, from Karzai all the way down to ordinary Afghans, that's the challenge for the United States and for the NATO allies. There's no point in trying to fight a counterinsurgency campaign unless you have a credible partner at the top, and unless the Afghan people feel at the bottom that the government doesn't exist to steal from them, that it exists to make their lives better and to feel safer. The question, we've heard some tough words from the Prime Minister in the UK. We're waiting to hear what President Obama has to say. He described the Afghan elections this week as messy. That is quite an understatement. The hope is that he's being a lot tougher in private. The Bush administration enabled Karzai for all of those years. President Bush, everyone said, was sort of the desk officer for Afghanistan. He kept telling him he was doing a heck of a job over there. And the question now is whether Hamid Karzai thinks he owns us, or he gets the idea that perhaps we're not going to be in for the long haul if he doesn't clean up his act.
Right. You lived for many years in the United Kingdom. Give us a sense of the kind of debate that's being held there. There was a poll yesterday saying an extraordinary number of British people who were polled, 73%, are now in favour of British troops being pulled out of Afghanistan. Of course, this comes on the wake of an increase in killings of British forces. Do you see Afghanistan being something that the United States is going to be perhaps having to look after solely within, say, a year?
Well, it's getting there, and it's surprising for two reasons. One, the British are, let's face it, a warrior people. They're in most of these things. They believe in punching above their weight by using their forces around the world. It's part of what they believe makes them greater than a middle power. And the fact that the British are losing support so dramatically in Afghanistan shows what happens when the leadership in the West, across the board, is not making the case to their people that what happens in Afghanistan has already proven in 9/11 to affect the rest of the world. All of the terrorist acts, including the ones in London, can be traced back to that border area of Afghanistan and Pakistan. But the leadership over these 8 years has lost the enthusiasm, the rationale, whatever the political motivation, to make the case about why it's so important to be there. And thus, when the casualties come, when the pain and suffering occurs, it's really affecting public opinion across the board.
Right. Carla, this Italian verdict, what significance does it have beyond being symbolic?
Well, I think it's symbolic. Nobody's going to go to jail, but it's a very clear statement of the international revulsion toward the violation of civil liberties by the Bush administration. Whether we feel revulsion here about what happened at home, and it did terrible damage to the standing. And so I think it's just one more reminder. The Obama administration says it's going to do things differently, but it's a reminder that it has to keep that, because it's important to American standing, and from a moral point of view, it's important.
Jamie, do you think that the Obama administration is going to do things differently? What is the point of rendering terror suspects to foreign justice? Why not try them in the United States?
I do think they're definitely trying to do something different, and they've rejected all of the procedures that were considered normal under the Bush years that were tantamount to torture. So they are doing something different. This verdict, my problem with it is it's more about policy than it's about law to me, because in the facts of the case, the Italian government was agreeing with the CIA and allowed them to do this. And it strikes me that what's happening increasingly in Europe, in the United States, is courts, lawyers, judges are basically pulling the foreign policy machinery out of the executive branches and trying to make these decisions themselves.
Can the foreign policy machinery allow something that is a violation of international law, a violation of treaties, and a violation of fundamental morality? That's why you have a separation of powers. That's why you have a court. If not, I mean, the Bush administration said, you know, l'état c'est moi, I can make any decision I want to make.
I would take that more seriously if the Italian government was being prosecuted. The Italian government allowed the CIA to do this. Berlusconi himself has said, so what? This is the war on terrorism.
The executive branch of the Italian
government. Well, right.
Well,
And so if the judicial branch were prosecuting the Italian government and then afterwards coming after the CIA, I would take it a little more seriously.
This is a fascinating discussion. I wish we had more time for it, but I want to squeeze in one last question with you on a different topic. The significance of Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, saying that he will not run again in the poll next January. What does it mean for the peace process? Has the United States got a pivotal role to play even?
Well, clearly, peace will never come to the Middle East if the United States doesn't play a prominent role. And one thing we've learned over the years is the less role the United States plays, the worse things are. Having said that, so far, the Obama administration has been struggling to make progress here. And the fact that Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, has decided to step down is a reflection of basically the depressing reality for the Palestinians. He's never been the most dynamic Palestinian leader, but he does reflect.
He's a reasonable man.
He's a reasonable man, and he does reflect, the old guard, and is the closest to the great hero Yasser Arafat. But he's reflecting their depression that nothing's going to get done.
Carla, what do you think? Do you think that these elections are even going to take place in January?
Highly unlikely. There would have to be a deal with Hamas, and that doesn't look very likely at this point. I think this is just a cry of anguish and frustration, and a real warning to the Obama administration. They better come up with a strategy for this because it's all unraveling.
All right. Carla Robbins, Jamie Rubin, thank you very much for joining us.
Nice to be with you.